Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. Now today I want to do a little bit more discussion about star trackers, and the reason for that is because I have so many people ask me about how I actually set up my star tracker in the field. Now I'm not going to be in the field doing it, I'm going to do it here so you can see better. But the reality is, the setup of a star tracker does not have to be complicated. Let me tell you now, the thing I notice most about star trackers is that we tend to overcomplicate them. It's a very, very simple device, a star tracker, and the number one aim of our star tracker is to get it to rotate around at the same speed as the stars rotate across our night sky. Now that sounds very simple, and the one thing that causes the most bother for us is polar alignment. So I'll talk about that as well. But the reality is, what we tend to do is overcomplicate the mounting brackets, plates, and the methodology to mount our camera on top. So sometimes I'll see people with monstrosities with the camera about this high above the actual tracker itself, and you know, it just feels like something that's ready to blow over in the wind to me. Now, there are a number of star trackers available, and you know that. I am going to show you a few different ones. So I've got the Nomad, MSM Nomad tracker here, which I use a fair bit. So I'll show you that one. I've also got the Skywatcher Star Adventurer Mini, which is a great little tracker. I love this. This is a beautiful piece of work. Also, we have, where is it? This one, another Skywatcher product, which is a Skywatcher Star Adventurer 2i. Now this thing's bulletproof. It is very strong, powerful. The first thing people ask me about star trackers is, for example, with the Mini, they'll say, oh, will it take, 5-6 kilograms of weight or something or other? I say, forget it. The Mini is not made as a big, heavy-duty tracker. It's just not. This one, however, is made for much more weight. And, the operation of all of these trackers is exactly the same. They do exactly the same thing. First thing we need to do is have our tripod somewhat level. Now, this even confuses people. Let me let you know something that I've discovered over the many, many years of doing this sort of stuff is for a star tracker of this type, okay, that has some sort of equatorial wedge or a method of getting an equatorial mount, the tripod top does not have to be level. It doesn't matter if it's a few degrees out one way or the other. It really makes no difference at all. The only tracker that really does have to be level is something like the Benro Polaris. Okay, here we go, this one. Because this is an alt-azimuth device, so it needs to rotate around an axis. And if it rotates around and that's not level, that axis, it's going to get out of alignment. But this does not rotate around that axis. It doesn't. Once you polar align it, it doesn't move anymore. Now, just on this Benro Polaris, by the way, if anyone wants to buy a cheap Benro Polaris, I have this perfectly working unit available for somebody. Now, there's nothing wrong with it. It works fine, but I just never use it. I've got too many trackers, and this is the one that I find I just don't want to use it. I want to use these other ones. They're smaller, lighter. This one is a much more delicate machine. Does a lot more apparently, but I prefer to use these simple trackers. So hit me up if you're interested in a almost brand new Benro Polaris. Okay, so let's move on. So we have here, this is the Move Shoot Move wedge base. The reason I like the wedge base, or a wedge base of some sort, is because it's just so easy to get the angle that you're looking for. Okay, so let me paint a couple of scenarios for you. What a lot of people do is they will use, for example, one of these V or Z or Z plates as the wedge. And so they'll put it on here instead of this. Okay, so they might stick it on there, something like that, and then decide, well, I'll just change my angle to get my angle of north or south celestial pole sorted out there, and then I will grab my Nomad and somehow work out how to attach it here because it needs an Arca Swiss plate. But the problem is, look, you can see a couple of problems here. Firstly, these things have a little bit of flex in them. You've got to do them up really tight to not have that. So if you have the whole tracker plus other gear on top, then a camera up here, you can see what I'm talking about. It's too much flex. Really hard to actually do a fine adjustment on these things because it's a big adjustment. Nah, forget it. I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't bother with one of these on that particular axis. Now, the other thing that some people might do is put a ball head on here like that. And then, of course, you can adjust the angle of that using like a ball head does. Now that's a more solid approach than the V or Z plate, but it's still really hard to get a fine adjustment because the thing moves. As soon as you undo that, it just flops. So, okay, you can put your star tracker on here, tighten it down, and you know, it will work. Don't get me wrong, it will work, but the ability to get that angle there is much more difficult using that method. So the other method that a lot of people use, I haven't got one here to demonstrate, is a three-way geared head. Now, a three-way geared head is a very strong and solid, robust way of getting a good angle on that to do your polar alignment. So yeah, you could certainly use one of those. I have no problem with those. I don't use them because they're big, heavy. It's just stuff I don't really want to carry around in my bag. I tend to go back to, as you already know, the method I showed you at the very beginning here. So let's just get that up again. The wedge. This is the MSM wedge. Oh, and Star Adventurer also make an excellent wedge for the trackers. Here we go. Here's our Star Adventurer wedge, and you can see it there. Really, really nice, robust unit. Much more solid than the MSM wedge. It has a Vixen mounting here rather than an Arca Swiss mounting. So that's something to consider depending on what sort of the rest of the arrangement that you have. But of course, with that, you put the tracker on, so it goes on like this, locks down really, really solidly, because these Star Adventurer trackers are built a little bit more strongly. They are heavier. So of course, that's a bit of a downside perhaps. But then you can put whatever you want on the front here. Now, some of them, let me see, what have I got here? Here we go. Just goes on like that. Now I've got, as you can see here, a move, shoot, move V-plate here. Now I do that because I love having a flat surface to begin with when I'm shooting. I put my camera up here, I've got a ball head here so I can move that around to frame up whatever it is I want to shoot. And I've got a number of adjustments here. I've also got an adjustment here if I need to use that to get the platform back level again. Now this is, to be honest, exactly the same setup I have on the Move, Shoot, Move Nomad. And for all of these trackers, and of course, you can see I've got it on the Skywatcher Star Adventurer 2i. So I'm using the same methodology for all of my trackers. And because of that, there's consistency. I know exactly how I'm going to be doing things before I even get out there in the field. One of the other things I do is I tend to keep this part of my arrangement assembled all the time. So you'll see there I've got the ball head and the V-plate and the little mount that goes on the Skywatcher here. I use that assembled all the time. And you can see I've got the same thing on the Nomad. See, it's always in my camera bag. I don't take this apart. Now some of you will say, oh, how do you carry that around? It's really easy. If you can't put that in a camera bag and squeeze it into a pocket somewhere, you know, that's not at all difficult to do. Now, MSM did change these plates a little bit with the longer levers to get more leverage into these to do them up nice and tight. And that is a much better design than the previous one. But there you go. I just use ball heads, a V plate. I don't really like the ZZ plate. Too many hinges in that one, too many flex points. Now I have to say, on this very point alone, some of you are trying to put gear on some of these trackers that is really big and heavy. Now, you're asking for trouble using thin, lightweight equipment to take heavy cameras and heavy lenses. There are better options out there if you want to do that. These trackers like the Nomad and the Skywatcher Star Adventurer Mini, they're made small for a reason. They're small, portable, easy to hike around with, and you put your camera and lens on it, but don't shoot with long, heavy telephoto lenses. Use wide-angle lenses. Now, I shoot most of my stuff between 20 millimeters and 50 millimeters, And mind you, that's all pretty lightweight. You don't need counterweights when you're using these. If you want to use something bigger and heavier, then I would probably suggest you use something like this Skywatcher Star Adventurer 2i with the counterweight system. Because the counterweight system, that's what it's for. It's to take that heavier burden. The motor will have no trouble moving the counterweight. You can physically put a counterweight on this, the Mini one, but that's not what it's made for. I think it's important. Don't try and overload everything. That's my number 2 advice. What are we up to? Anyway. Okay, so once we get to this point, I've got the Skywatcher Star Adventurer base here, so I'll just demonstrate that. Now, one of the things, and I've talked to you about this before, is that's lacking in a lot of these tracking systems is the ability to move the head and the base around in this way. Now, I never could understand why they didn't incorporate something like a rotating base. So I just incorporated my own. This is the Faisal one on the move, shoot, move. Let me get the move, shoot, move back again. Got too many bits of gear here, haven't I? So they've incorporated a really lightweight rotating base. Works fine because it's not too big and cumbersome. It's still very, very light. And you can then move around and you'll say, well, why do you need a rotating base? Well, it's really simple. We've got to line our tracker up to the north or the south celestial pole. Now that's exactly true south or true north. Now if you just plonk your tripod down out in the field somewhere, well, okay, where's north? Oh, let's say, oh, it's over there. Well, either you just use a rotating base and go like that, or you've got to pick the whole thing up and turn it around. That's crazy. I mean, especially if you've just spent heaps of time trying to get a nice level surface there somewhere. Just use a rotating base on the bottom. It just makes life so much easier. So anyway, both of these have that. Now, as far as polar aligning is concerned, once you get your mount in the orientation of roughly south or roughly north. Now, I am in the southern hemisphere. Now, those of you in the southern hemisphere will know there's no pole star, there's no Polaris, so it's harder to polar align. But I always use apps on my phone. But the thing is, how do I mount my phone onto these tracking mounts? I'm going to show you a few different options. Number one, there's a plate that I bought from a company in New Zealand called Skylabs, and it has the ability to just sit on there like that. Now, I've showed you this before and it works really well. You put your phone in there like that, and when I want to face toward the South Celestial Pole, let's just say, the South Celestial Pole's up there, which is where the tracker is facing. But of course you can see that my phone is pointing down to the ground, so it's going to be facing underground to, you guessed it, the North Celestial Pole. So all I do is apply the app that I want to use. Now, the one that I use the most is Sky Safari 7 Plus or Sky Safari 7 Pro. You can use Sky Safari 6 Plus or Pro, but the basic version, Sky Safari 7 or 6, without the Plus or the Pro, is no good for this because it doesn't enable you to get the compass reticles to line up. So it has all the features except you don't know where exactly how to line up the South or North Celestial Pole. So here we are. I put my phone in there and I apply the app, and then I just make adjustments as required, as you can see here, up or down, just like you would do if I was looking through a polar scope. So some of you are going to be asking, well, why don't you use a polar scope? I have never needed to use a polar scope. Firstly, that's the first question, because this method works really well for wide angle photography. Secondly, down here in the Southern Hemisphere, I cannot see octans. I don't even know what it looks like up there. It's really difficult. You know, my eyesight's not that great. I'm trying to look through a scope, which is a pain in the backside. I'm down here trying to look up through there. No, I'm too old for that. I'd much prefer to use something simple like this. Now, let me just move that aside. And so what I've been using here with the Nomad system, Move, Shoot, Move have come up with a few different options here. They did have the original phone mount, which basically mounted on the back of the Nomad, and you had to get down here. But again, it was fiddly and cumbersome. So they came out with this. Now this is a pretty generic phone holder basically, but it's got an Arca Swiss plate on the bottom. So what you can do here is, by using the mount here, is just stick it on there like that. And then you have the ability to mount your phone in there like that, nice and flat. And you can use the Sky Safari app, or perhaps you want to use photo pills. Now, I know a lot of people that use photo pills spot stars to line up to the north or south celestial pole. I haven't found it to be as accurate, but other people do use it with great results. So I'll mention it as an option for you. So this is basically doing exactly the same thing that I was doing with this thing, except it's much smaller and easier to carry around. This Skylab's mount is excellent, but it is a little bit big and cumbersome. So take that for what it's worth. So you can see there, I can line up wherever I want. The other opposite pole, so here in the southern hemisphere, I'm always lining up to the north celestial pole. But if you live in the northern hemisphere, then all you're going to do is be lining up to the south celestial pole, which is underground, depending on the latitude that you're at. And of course, you just make the adjustments here, lock down that rotating base, lock down this plate here, and you're good to go. You take the phone mount off, and then the base here is polar aligned. Now, I mentioned before that you don't necessarily need the tripod to be exactly level. So I'm not going to say it doesn't matter, but the reality is, unless your tripod is way out of level, it makes it a bit awkward when you're putting a camera and tripod. It doesn't matter because you're not moving around that level at all. It's probably good practice to make sure it's reasonably level and nicely tight and done up, and all of the tripod legs and everything else are quite firm. So, okay, once we've got that on there, we just put our tracker back on like this, and we are good to go. Camera goes up the top here. Now I know my tracker is polar aligned. I can move all of these, doesn't matter how I move them. It doesn't take the tracker out of alignment. The camera moves, the tracker does not move. And if you bump your tripod or move it, yes, you will have to re-polar align. Okay, so I want to show you another option that a friend of mine came up with. So a good friend of mine called Eric Wilkes designed with a 3D printer this phone holder for the MSM Nomad. So let me show you. And the way this one works is, let's just say that we're not polar aligned. Okay, so I've just set the mount here on the tripod on the base, and you can have whatever base you've got there, whether it might be the MSM one here, or it might be a ball head like I said before, or it might be a three-way head, whatever geared head, whatever you've got. And he's designed this so that you put your phone in there like that, because it attaches to the actual body of the tracker. So unlike the other system whereby I'm mounting something to the base of the tracker to do the polar aligning, this one has the tracker already mounted on all of that. So it's really handy. And all you do the same thing. You can still adjust the angles with the adjustments, the same as you do with every other thing. But the phone is right there next to the tracker. Now, this is something a lot of people ask, and I've done some experimenting, and so has Eric, the guy who made this design. If you have your tracker turned on and you put a phone that close to it, you will have a bit of trouble with the compass inside the phone not reading accurately, because the circuitry is playing up with it. But I have found with the Nomad, if it's turned off, then it doesn't do that. Thing is, with the Skywatcher Star Adventurer, this one, it's got a battery pack on the back there. I found if you put a phone too close to that, whether it's turned on or not, you can have issues with the phone not calibrating properly. So take that as you will, but that's my experience using some of these trackers. And that is why with these ones, I don't have the tracker mounted. I just use the base. Now the base on those Skywatcher trackers, and these by the way, they're aluminium. There's not much in the way of metal in them to make any impact on a compass. So anyway, this is what it looks like. So the MSM Nomad fits neatly in there. He's machined a hole in the back so you can get to the screw and screw it on and make it very tight. It's a really well-made little device. Now, Eric Wilkes, I'll list a link here so that you can go. He's got some really good information on his website about polar aligning using Sky Safari 7 app on your phone, because there's a few little idiosyncrasies with that you have to be aware of. So anyway, that's about it for this. All we do here, once we've polar aligned with this one, I just take the phone away and leave that there. In fact, with this particular Nomad, I never take it off. It sits in my bag. I've got this tiny little carry bag, and this whole thing fits in there. I don't change the angle of the wedge. And so it takes me all of about 1 minute to unpack everything, put it on the tripod, and get it polar aligned. It's really, really quick. So look, just to recap, polar aligning is very important. My strong advice to you, though, is to make sure you have a nice solid base underneath the camera to start with. Don't worry about these flexi plates and fiddly ball heads that are too light duty or difficult to actually make fine tuning adjustments. It's really important to make sure this process is easy. You know why? Because taking photos with a star tracker and then blending in foregrounds is complicated. We don't want to overcomplicate this any more than we have to. So for me, simple is good, and simple is always good. So anyway, if you have any comments about anything that I have talked about here today, please let me know. I know that this topic is something a lot of you are very interested in, and I'd be really interested in your methodology. What do you do when you're setting up your tracker and the camera and everything else to polar align? Really interested in that. Oh, and by the way, if anybody wants one of these, I have one. Okay, so hit me up in the comments below. All right, I'll see you guys in the next video.